Cool.
All right. I think we are all ready to go. I'm just going to see. There we go. All right. I think the whole thing is ready to go. I was able to share the screen. Everybody see the screen? It's kind of wide, right? Let me know if you could see it.
Yep, we can see it.
Yep.
Perfect. So I love how this forum operates. We've got the Hacker News forum. Anybody know about Y Combinator and the Hacker News over here?
I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been there a couple of times.
That's right. Hacker News is a bunch of thoughtful people from Y Combinator, but also people who are in their startups, and in general, just technology people all over the world. They constantly discuss very interesting articles about tech, about economics, politics, and if you notice, all of this stuff has a ton of interesting comments that people have. So this is where, today, I saw the following thing. Facebook faces a public relations crisis. What about a legal one? A lot of interesting things, but one of them was about Photoshop. And I guess it scrolled off the screen already because they have so many different people talking. This is what I want Intercoin to become. I'd love Intercoin to become a forum for which people talk about community currencies, socio-political and economic issues, and the technology people show up. And all these different categories could be here, like technology. So currently we're using all this stuff to document how things are going to work. But now this is essentially us talking and more people coming. And I think that within a few months, this is going to turn into the counterpart to the Intercoin show. So what we're doing now and what we're talking about now, throughout the week between the shows, we're going to talk about here. So today, I noticed a couple things, and I just wanted to pick up on Stacy's post. Stacy, when did you? What made you decide to put up the NFTs post this week, and what's been going on in the world of NFTs?
No, actually, I just commented on that. Marcy did that.
Oh yeah. Oh cool. Very cool. Well, I see.
I'm pretty sure that.
Elena. Oh, this is Elena.
Oh, Elena. That one's Elena. Sorry. I seen one also from Marcy. There was two this week, which was interesting.
So let's talk about it. It's interesting that this week we found out that basically Photoshop is adding stuff for NFT for artists. And basically, where is this? Let's actually talk about why NFTs are so popular right now. This is Marcy's post, and NFTs are experiencing kind of a recurrent resurgence. I think the original NFTs are like domain names and things that people bought rights to, change and do stuff with. And now NFTs have become this vehicle. It's almost like replacing copyright for artists, because you can't really control how people are going to use your stuff. You can't really control how they're going to copy it. After the internet and the web came out, it really disrupted a lot of online content, journalism, artists, and so on. And now they have this way to at least have control over what's considered official. And that's because you can trace the supply chain all the way back to the artist and figure out, oh, this is the official Picasso, or this is the official thing. It's always existed with large famous artworks from museums, and sometimes gets corrupted too with fakes and forgeries, but it's now become available to everybody. So here we've got, this is literally from today or yesterday, Photoshop will get an option soon to prepare something as an NFT, and what they're talking about is the ability to link their Adobe ID with their crypto wallet, allowing a sort of verified certificate proving the art source is authentic. So I just wanted to kind of kick it off, talk about what do you think is the motivation for so many artists and content creators who have been on the web for the last 20 years. What does blockchain now give them that they didn't have before? And how is this a game changer for people?
Well, I talk to a lot of artists, and one of the things I usually ask them, artists that are in NFTs, and one of the things I always ask them is is it more, have you been more successful, since you've started doing it in NFT form? And every single one has said yes. So I think it gives you way more of a reach as well.
It gives you a reach, and it also gives you this idea that you can have a programmable token. So copyright's kind of dumb. It's like, okay, that's it. It's my copyright, 1 or 0. With the token, you could have all kinds of things. I'm going to get into like NFT mixes and stuff like that, which is what Intercoin's pioneering. But before we do that, Elena, what do you think? I just want to kind of get your perspective on your post, and if you want to talk about it.
Yes, my post was regarding decentralizations with the NFTs. And I was a bit sad to hear that few people lost their series of NFTs on open source. And it's great for us to see the decentralized world, that Intercoin helping people to be decentralized. And when news came out that, again, even NFTs world coming back, become centralized, it's a bit sad for me, actually. Because the freedom, I think, for artists, it's the freedom to sell to anyone, and I think that that their rights to hold their NFTs and to be able to trace who sell them after that and get rewarded. This is the beauty of blockchain and all the history of NFTs. And I read the art from New York, and she's just exploring, but about the NFTs, and she also commented that it's better for us to have our own platforms for selling our arts as our own website, instead of to be on centralized platform where, again, we are not holding the rights on our NFTs.
I mean, decentralization is definitely a big deal. I think disintermediation, the ability to get the middle man and woman, usually corporation, out of it is a big deal. I mean, artists have it with Spotify. People started to get it with Patreon. And a lot of these things are intertwined. So when you go to YouTube, you can think of the platform as sort of disintermediating between, letting artists have more choice, a free market of choice. Ooh, how did that happen? So interesting with these scam sites. What just happened? I'm just even curious. It landed on a misspelling of YouTube. Anyway, so all these platforms came up and they said, oh, you could be an artist and you could monetize. But of course, these platforms are also subject to Wall Street profits and earnings, whether they are Facebook, whether they are YouTube, and they deplatform certain people. But having said that, even though they deplatform or demonetize various people, and there's always outcry from the people and from their fans, and shows get canceled and so on, they've platformed a lot of people. They've created a lot more opportunity that used to exist. So while we could focus on the deplatforming of people who already have platforms, big platforms sometimes, we could focus the other way and talk about how the web allowed people to publish. And now, Web 2.0, you could say, YouTube allowed people to publish more interesting things, have a community, and then monetize it with Web 3.0. So I think, though, that there's a couple problems here. One is that you're still at the mercy of some landlord, although you could have multiple ones. We deal with sites like Free Talk Live at Cubics. And these sites, are sometimes worried about getting deplatformed because they have these free shows every day. They are
censored or anything like that.
It's completely free. It's libertarian, and they got kicked off of Discord. The official reason was something like there was some sexual harassment or something posted. But I don't know. I don't have the details. But my point is that Discord is a platform, and you can come up with all kinds of reasons to deplatform people. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, whether that's good or bad. What I'm here to say is that permissionless platforms like Bitcoin, BitTorrent, Ethereum, and others, all you have to do is deploy something, and they don't ask questions. They just let you, if you have the cryptocurrency to pay, then you can host. So that's where things are going. Now with NFTs, it's an interesting space. Like I said, it's completely voluntary. Most of the NFTs are read-only. They're just for viewing. And personally, I don't know if there's a lot of longevity in that. And maybe there is. I just don't understand necessarily the art space, when you have the, triangle, black square, art sells for millions or something like that. Something like this sells for millions because the person who, that's actually something. But the idea is that many of these things, I don't understand why or how. There's some blue squares here. I don't know if there's anything. Do you think there's anything here if you zoom in, or do you think it's just blue behind it?
I think it's something blue.
Just something blue?
I can see your point, and nevertheless, NFT space generated 10 billion in trading volume during Q3 and this year globally. It's just unbelievable numbers, incredible numbers. And that's exactly numbers that artists received. And I'm really happy to hear that artists getting paid and Ethereum drawing accounted for 77% of it.
I find it fascinating that Ethereum is the platform that's used because the transaction fees are so high. It's almost like you're showing off how much money you can waste in just transaction fees alone. But there is conspicuous consumption. It's an actual thing, right? Conspicuous consumption is a concept. It talks about how, New York Times says it's out of style. It's a purchase of goods and services for the specific purpose of, advertising. See, this is what the web looks like now. Goods and services for the purpose of displaying one's wealth. Conspicuous consumption is a means to show one's social status, especially when publicly displayed goods and services are too expensive for other members of a person's class. So there was that idea of keeping up with the Joneses, but this is kicking it up to the next level. There's also something called Veblen goods, which Norman, I think you know, right? We were talking about it before. Veblen good is...
Yeah. That's a classic... That's a very classic thing you learn about in Economics 101.
So talk about that, Norman. What is, how do Veblen goods kind of defy the usual supply and demand?
Yeah, okay, so basically, alright, usually when you have, a regular good, as the price goes up, there's less demand for it, right? Because, as things get, more expensive, people buy less of it. And the other way around works as well. So when things are less expensive, people buy more of it. That's the way these things usually work. But with Veblen goods, it's actually reversed. So when the prices of these goods increase, people actually buy more of it. And when the prices of these goods decrease, people buy less of it. And so oftentimes they're luxury products in a sense. Typically, a lot of them have this kind of effect, but regular products are opposite. Veblen goods, basically.
Yeah, if you look at the price elasticity of demand. So let's talk about the economics of NFTs for a second. It's interesting because NFTs are non-fungible, right? So let's go to the beginning. What is a NFT, right? What is a non-fungible token?
Yeah.
I think that's
I
a
think
good place to
NFT
start.
is a really good example of it because, like, if you think about a random like NFT that like I minted, right? The price of it is going to be like really low, and then the demand of it is also going to be non-existent. But if you look at something like CryptoPunks, actually like the higher the price goes, the higher the demand is, right? Like if like a CryptoPunk gets sold by like Christie's for like millions of dollars, like that in and of itself becomes a demand driver for that NFT. The fact that like it's sold for like a record-breaking amount of like Ethereum.
So basically, okay, so let's kind of go through the basics of NFTs for those people who would be listening and they're like, oh, what's all this non-fungible tokens? I thought that you had coins. I mean, by now, if you haven't heard about NFTs, you're probably living under one of those pet rocks that just got sold for like $1 million. So let's talk about why those rocks are being sold for such amounts. First of all, there's something called the coincidence of wants. So that means that if somebody wants A and somebody else happens to not only have A, but also want B, which the first person has, then they can make a deal. In other words, if there's only two people and they're trying to make a deal, then both people have to have something the other wants in exactly the right quantity. So if something is fungible means you can any one of them is as good as any other. Like flour is fungible because a big bag of flour, little pieces of it are just as good as any other little piece. Coins are fungible, so any quarter or dime is as good as any other quarter or dime for the most part, almost all the time. So there, you don't need exact amounts. You can make change. You can, even before electronic money, you could have some change in your pocket, or the vendor would have change, and it would be close enough, the deal would be made, and you could buy the item. Now, with non-fungible tokens, you don't necessarily have that ability to measure out the exact value of something. Usually, non-fungible tokens like ERC-721 are bought with fungible money tokens like ERC-20. So at least one side still has to sort of give an exact amount, and then so people can have auctions. They can do price discovery using bonding curves like they used to do. We're going to talk about bonding curves a little later, but bonding curves made their debut with this guy who was talking about curation markets. And we're talking 3 years ago. People forgot this, but a lot of the curation markets, you needed to discover prices also based on sort of non-fungible stuff. And so the idea that a price goes up as more people bid or whatever, this was the basic idea. And actually, all these things from 3 years ago are hot again 4 years ago. So what are we talking about here? We're saying that the market doesn't always clear. So when we talk about markets clearing, it means that a buyer and a seller and their price curves, they meet in a certain place and they decide, okay, we are going to actually, this is going to happen, right? So the buyer says, okay, this is how much I'm going to buy at this price or whatever, or this is how much I'm going to sell, the seller says. And the buyer says, this is how much I'm going to buy. And at some point they say, okay, well, then we can agree on a price. So that's how normally things work. And like Norma was saying, the lower the price, the more buyers are willing to buy. That is not necessarily the case with Veblen goods. And so what happens with non-fungible tokens is that the market clears very occasionally. You know, if you have a community, and this is the difference between coins and non-fungible tokens. When you have a coin, a community may have a coin. You could have transactions happening every day, right? You could have people go into the restaurant and paying. Then the restaurant turns around and pays the waiters. Then the waiters go around and get a haircut. All of these things can use the coin in different quantities, and it's being spent all the time. the market is clearing all the time, right? You're trading your coin for this, for that. With non-fungible tokens, on the other hand, one of the sides in the transaction is not fungible. So it's either a 1 or a 0. You either buy the whole thing or nothing. And the market would actually be even harder if you had to only trade non-fungible tokens over the counter, as like bartering, right? The market would almost never clear. So the times that the market clears, it usually, all that effort to try to make a deal, like an OTC deal or something, usually means that the price is going to go for a lot. If you're selling a Picasso, you're putting a lot of effort into something that you wouldn't put into selling a loaf of bread, right? Even though the Picasso and the materials might cost just as much as the loaf of bread, but you're going to have essentially ascribe more value to it. So when it comes to coins, it's something called seigniorage. Seigniorage is profit made by a government or someone issuing a currency. The difference between the face value of the coins and their production cost. So the production cost of most NFTs is negligible, but the face value of those NFTs is very high. And the economic explanation for why that is, people say, how can something like that go for that much? And we just saw the New York Post article about talking about that. Literally, the New York Post, New York Post, rectangle art, I don't know. It goes for millions, right? It's the same exact idea of why that is. Why does it go for that? $43.8 million for this? Yeah, I wouldn't buy that. I can just recreate that myself. So why do people do that? One reason is because the market clears very occasionally. And if you've ever been involved with OTC deals about, PPE for hospitals or gold or Bitcoins, there's a lot of effort that goes into getting people to agree on something. And so there's always going to be a price tier at which, you have the high-end stuff. And as to what is high-end, I think it's all different. It all usually comes down, as usual, to promoting artists. And the difference today is that the artists can build their own platform and they can use permissionless platforms to get big. Whereas in the past, they needed kingmakers like the music industry, A&R departments, or film studios, production. Today, with everyone able to produce their own videos from YouTube and so on, it's interesting that people are trying to monetize it. So I just wanted to pause here and kind of ask, what do you all think about the economics of it? Does that make sense that NFTs obviously get sold for $5 too and $1, but we hear about the top ones, and we hear about them because, like I said, there's always going to be top ones somewhere, and the top ones are non-fungible. So there's really has to be a coincidence of wants, and that's what happens pretty rarely. And when it happens, that's when the big bucks come out. So I think that kind of explains the pricing of NFTs. I mean, am I right? Like, what do you all think makes them so expensive?
I think, honestly, a lot has to do with community. If you have the right people in the community, I've only been in the NFT space for a month now, so I'm pretty new to it. But something that really surprised me is how amazing the communities are. And they all kind of work with each other as well. But I definitely think community drives the price.
The community does drive the price. I think that
Stacey makes a really important point, I think. Just to interject here for a second. I think the value, like, when you're looking at things like art, and you're not looking at things like basic human necessities like food, shelter, right? The value of it is often like really, it's subjective. But what does it mean for like the value to be subjective? It means it's up to each individual to determine how much it's worth, right? And just the way like people work, the way we determine a big part of how we determine whether something is worth something is whether it has some kind of like personal like relevance to you, right? So think about it. Like if you had a wedding ring, right? that has a certain value ascribed to it because it's related to an experience that like you've had personally, right? So when someone comes in, like sure, the gold that it might be made out of might only be worth, you know, $1,000, but would you like sell your like wedding ring for $1,000? Like probably not, right? It's probably worth like a lot more than that to you. And that's like I think a similar dynamic is at play here with NFTs. You have to look at more than just, you know, the economics and trying to plot everything on supply, because a lot of it is, okay, you know, how does this piece of artwork speak to you? Why is it like relevant to you? You know, a big part of like NFTs, okay, like when Stacy was talking about community, right? Let's say you have a something like the Fame Lady Squad, right? Which is Stacy, one of her friends, Danielle, is working on that project. Big theme of that project is like women's empowerment, right? And a lot of projects have been tapping into that, and it drives value for people who buy it because women's empowerment is like a theme that like resonates with a lot of people's lived experiences, and that's how people ascribe value to it in a sense. So not everything can, I think, be I don't think the idea of modeling everything on like supply and demand or like market clearing is necessarily the best like mental framework to look at it. When someone buys NFT for like 49 million, I think there's forces greater that we have to look at there. And to take another example, CryptoPunks, right? CryptoPunks, a big part of the, you know, reason why CryptoPunks are valuable is actually they tap into this idea of digital identity, right? If you think about like what human needs are on the bottom of the pyramid is things like food, shelter, security. But as you go up, people have like a real need for like, they have a need to define like who they are, like who are you as a person. And as you know, like people pay a lot of money to access this identity. It's a lot of how advertising works, right? Like when you shoot an advertisement for like I don't know if you know about like the world, like there's this really well-known advertisement called "The World's Most Interesting Man," and it's do you guys know about it? Like the world's, like he is the world's most interesting man. It's used to advertise like Dos Equis. You guys like familiar with that?
The most interesting man in the world. I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. That was his
Exactly, right.
A lot of memes.
Taps into when people, why do people buy, why is that advertisement effective? It's because when they buy that brand of alcohol, they tap into the identity of the most interesting man in the world, and people are willing to pay a lot of money for it. Even sometimes, you know, if you're rich, okay, you know, there's a limit to how much money you can spend on food, right? There's like a limit to that, but there's no limit to the amount of money like you can spend on like your own identity. That's something people will like spend like millions and millions and millions of dollars on, right? And I think you see some of that play out a little bit in NFTs and specifically profile pictures. So that I think is two key themes I want to break up. So one is in the case of like wedding rings, right? And things like the Fame Lady project. One of them is a subjective experience and how value is ascribed through human experiences, right? And then the other one is this theme of identity, which is shown in CryptoPunks, and I think is really important as well to bring to the discussion here.
The power of memes, the power of community. I don't think enough of NFTs is connected with the idea of memes. I think that memes drive a lot of social capital. I think we need another word than just social capital. I would say mind share capital. So like, as long as this guy Dos Equis guy is the most interesting man in the world, has commercials, right? As long as that happens, we're going to have memes, right? I don't always, like, the memes are this. I don't know if you've ever seen it. They have him with this thing, and then he's always like, I don't always test my code, but when I do it in production. It's always this.
The thing with memes, though, is memes depend, like, whether something is a meme or not depends on, like, the person perceiving it, right? So, something like, one thing you often hear on Twitter is, like, on crypto Twitter specifically, is, like, GMI, or, like, NGMI, right? Or, like, WAGMI, or something like that. To someone like that's not in the crypto Twitter space, that's just like it's nonsense. It doesn't mean anything, right? It's just a string of letters like put together. But if you are tapped into like the crypto world and you have like a certain experience, right? You like those words like mean a lot to you. Specifically, like what does it mean? Why is it relevant to crypto people, and why does it resonate? And why do people like kind of circle, like why do people kind of like gather around these memes? It's because, so think about like GMI, right? Gonna make it, or like NGMI, not gonna make it. I think a big part of like what makes this meme relevant is because a lot of crypto holders, they're dealing with like markets that are really volatile, right? Like the 2017 bear market, when like the prices of major cryptocurrencies dropped by like 90% or like 95 like plus percent, right? And so like out of this like volatility, people kind of like reassured each other that, hey, like everything is going to be okay if you just hodl, if you just hold it, right? And I think the community found a lot of camaraderie in that kind of spirit, and as a result, like these words, when you say on Twitter, like they mean something to the crypto audience. And the reason like why it means something is because like no matter where you are, right, if you've been in crypto for long enough, like you've lived through this volatility, and thus it's relatable to you. And I think that's like what in a big part drives memes, especially in the crypto world. It's this concept of shared experience, I think, is really important.
I think community is important, but I just wanted to kind of get into this idea of communities and celebrities. All right. People don't think deeply about where does the capital come from? Where does the social capital, or in this case, the mindshare capital comes from? It comes from the advertising and music industry and others. All right. And a lot of the time, I criticize certain things in capitalism because sometimes the profit motive leads companies to push certain things that may not even be good, like vaping for children, or teens or whatever, but to make a profit. Other times it's pretty benign, but whatever is pushed into our subconscious is usually because it's reinforced by other people memeing and repeating, right? A meme is based on even the word meme is based on Dawkins. It's coined, I think, by Dawkins, talk about genetics, right? So a gene is propagated, and then a meme. I'm not sure if Dawkins really, the selfish gene. The word meme is a neologism coined by Richard Dawkins. There you go. Okay. The guy's had a lot of time, I guess. He was born a while ago. So the idea of memes propagating themselves is almost like, in a way, like a virus, but it's a benign virus usually. But the idea is, who are the pushers of these things? The issuers, right? They are the corporations that have the distribution network. So we're talking about, for example, the most valuable, the most interesting man, right? It is literally a capitalist corporation, Dos Equis, right? It's out to sell beer, and it hires another company that they give it money, and then that company comes up with a campaign, and they go through several ones, and of course the people who come up with this stuff are employed, so it's not like they're there's work for hire, so they don't own anything of that. So the meme is really generated entirely by companies pursuing their own profit motive on behalf of their shareholders or owners. So a lot of the memes are initiated that way through corporate stuff. Other memes like Family Guy and other things from movies are, yes, they are accidental. They're not maybe designed to be memes initially, right? But all of these things are produced by, at least today, they're produced completely by for-profit corporations, and they're put on for-profit networks. So one of my favorite. Yep.
I think you have like a point, but I think the correlation, especially with memes, of like what kind of capital is backing it and whether or not it becomes a meme, I think it's a tenuous relationship at best, right? Because if what you were saying is true, okay, then literally like any advertising campaign will work as long as you throw like enough money at it. Right, you just throw money at it, and then you can have whatever meme.
Well, it's not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary. It's almost necessary, or at least it was until recently. Like if you were Billy Joel and you were not discovered by Columbia Records, and you didn't have the distribution network for your music, how would you get your music to everybody? You know,
you have to write some. You have to make music that speaks to people. Like for example, okay, you talk about memes, right? Let's talk about memes. Pepe the Frog. You've seen Pepe. Is Pepe sponsored by Goldman Sachs? Pepe's not sponsored by Goldman Sachs. Who's backing Pepe? But it's one of the most recognized memes in the whole entire like crypto internet, right? So I think I can give you many more examples of like artists who've made works that really spoke to people and tapped into people's shared experience. So one of the top NFT artists right now. So her name is her Twitter handle is People Pleaser. Okay. When she first started out, she had like no backing. She had no backing whatsoever, but she made basically artworks that spoke to the crypto population, and they were really well received. And as a result, like she got a lot of traction, and eventually was invited by some top projects to do NFT artworks for them. So I don't think it's a necessary condition at all, especially with memes, to have capital backing it.
Well, look, there could be a growing amount of grassroots marketing and uptake of NFTs, and I think that's what gets people excited. And there's always been that way, the grassroots stuff, right? In Russia, there was this guy, Vysotsky. Elena would know. Vladimir Vysotsky, right? He wrote about all kinds of things that were, they weren't really promoted by the Russian government, but despite that, his tapes were bootleg copied. And the difference between that and something else in the Soviet Russia called samizdat, which is people self-publishing, is that magnetic tapes were much easier to copy than, say, copying a piece of paper. Now today you would think, oh, Xerox copying. Yeah, but back then people had to retype everything. And carbon paper, you could only type like 5 copies. So literally people did not have the means to copy physical paper unless you had access to a big print shop. And those were controlled. But with cassette tapes, this guy's music literally was able to be shared and reshared, even though the government may not have liked it. But that is one of the only examples that I know of, like, back then, without a distribution network, people were able to use this new technology, which is copying cassette tapes. You see, because before that, there was literally no way to copy, like, a record player, like a vinyl record. Like, how are you going to copy that? So you need the technology, and then you also need a distribution network. In this case, the people it was grassroots. We had the technology. Today we have the technology. I think we still need a distribution network because right now OpenSea and all of those are still centralized, right? So Elena, you were talking about, maybe you could talk about Vysotsky a little bit and talk about how people can be decentralized in sharing these things, because obviously most of the stuff in Soviet Russia was approved from some central committee on music or whatever and promoted. There weren't that many different, shall we say, PR companies, advertising companies pushing different types of music. There wasn't a music industry that had many different. Or am I wrong? So, like, what talk about the sort of Vladimir Vysotsky and the decentral. Why did people like share his stuff as opposed to someone else?
Well, about Vladimir Vysotsky, I don't know much. He actually died when I was very little, but I remember that my father used to listen his tape recordings, and actually few sentences in my brain that I thought that it's actually my personal beliefs. Apparently, just few years ago, when I've been on a concert in London in the name of Vysotsky, I realized that these words were actually from his songs. It was very strange realization. But anyway, probably Vysotsky was popular because he was against the government and he was against the actual captivity of the thought. And he was promoting the freedom of thoughts and freedom of communications that people in Soviet Union didn't have at that point. And people were sharing his songs privately, secretly even. But now with NFTs, when I talk with artists, most of them who are thinking to create their NFTs for their artworks, they actually excited that their art can be represented by the code on the blockchain. And because each NFT can be bought and sold just as the physical assets, but at the same moment can be traced, and the ownership of the art can be traced, and validity of each painting can be tracked as well. And that's I think the most important point that attracts all artists. And actually, we have one artist already listening to us. Maybe we can ask her what attracts her in NFTs, if she don't mind to speak. I don't know whether she can talk now or not. Leila, can you speak, or it's not convenient for you at the moment?
Hi, Lena. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking here. What was your question? This has been very helpful, super helpful. But I'm just multitasking.
You're welcome.
So
You're welcome to our AMA. Yeah. My question was, what attracts you in NFTs? What is your perspective? Why you are interested to put your own artworks in NFTs?
Well, I mean, I think, to be honest, I only started to focus on it after the whole Beeple thing happened. And then obviously he's in his own league, but I saw a lot of other artists, analog artists like myself, begin to jump on the bandwagon. So I do, kind of what put me off was a lot of the digital art that is being posted is like garbage, in my opinion, as someone who's classically trained. But listen, I'm not knocking the asset class. It is what it is. So I have just tried to understand from the sidelines and I'm no crypto or blockchain expert, and that's why, Lena, you have been super helpful, as has been Norman. I obviously have a lot else going on other than trying to get my art on an NFT, but to get on the blockchain. But to get to your question, I think the fact that it helps with ownership. I think it helps artists if the art gets resold for them to get royalties. So I think it's the authentication aspect of it that is unique. There's so many other questions that are unknown, and but I think to me, as an artist, that's probably the most important thing that we didn't have before.
Yes, thank you, Leila. Really appreciate your answer.
Is that right? I mean, that authentication of ownership is key?
Leila, there is no right or wrong. It's your personal opinion. That's what we are interested in. Because we with Intercoin, we try to work as much as possible for the community. And you, as a part of the community, actually welcome to our Telegram group. I've seen that you joined today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
I guess I shouldn't have been so forthcoming with my opinion on a lot of the stuff that's out there, but that's my humble opinion. And not to knock anybody else, but I'm just learning and curious, and just that's my humble opinion. So.
Thank you, Leila. Greg, back to you.
Well, I'd like somebody else on the team to kind of weigh in, maybe Stacy, and just talk about, what do you see because you're in the art industry, right? You've always been in the industry of creatives and artists, and I just wanted to ask, until NFTs, what was the feeling? Because the internet kind of all, disrupted all of that, because in the past you created your art, there was copyright enforcement, where you could sort of see, these print shops or these, things I can point to are making copies of what I'm doing. These publishing houses bought the rights to my book, and then these bootleg books are being done. So you had the Secret Service go after people, who were creating fake coins or fake dollar bills, counterfeiters. But then you had because that was their original job, the Secret Service was put into place for that originally. And they still do that today. And then, there's sometimes SWAT teams going after, there's the MPAA and the RIAA, these big industries representing supposedly all these penniless artists. But they're really sort of talking about how, you need to have copyright. So I remember all these fights about copyright, like SOPA, I don't know if anyone remember the Stop Online Piracy Act, all these attempts to sort of stop piracy as defined, people trying to copy the material, the movies, the stuff, and it's been shown that piracy sometimes doesn't reduce the demand, because those people weren't going to buy the movie anyway, but somebody else may buy it now because of how widespread it goes. And some people almost gave away their stuff or their trailers or their teasers. So what I want to ask about is, what was the relationship that you've seen over the last 10 years, whatever, that seeing people and artists and creating stuff, what was their relationship with the internet before and after NFTs? Do they see now that they don't have to rely on copyright police and enforcement, and they can somehow appeal to this new thing of this is quote official Picasso or my official stuff, versus the bootleg stuff, you can still view it, but it's not official? How much difference does that make actually for artists today?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is when people hear NFT, they think art. I think that's the biggest mistake, because an NFT is absolutely anything that you want to prove ownership on the blockchain. So, I see people get into the argument over, whose art is better, or real, if it's art done with say paint as opposed to digital art, all that kind of stuff. And it really varies. And then also I see a lot of artists now when having an NFT that includes where you get the digital version, but also they mail you the physical version. So I think what we just need to keep in mind is there's so many different types, And as long as it's safe, secure on the blockchain, I'm sure when you go on crypto Twitter, for example, there's people that have NFTs on their profile that they probably don't even own, right? But it stems back to life. People want what other people have. So they put themselves on the line and they either purchase, fake, whatever they do to put that on their profile. So I don't know, like, I don't really know how to explain that. Like, I guess when it comes down to ownership and proof, yeah, you can do that with an NFT. But, you know, there's still, you still, people will copy, and I guess it kind of is what it is. But it's from what I've talked to from artists, like I just mentioned a little while ago, anyone that I have asked, you know, are you making more money in the industry now? And basically the answer is like, you know, I did art and, you know, had it locally. I did art in the streets. Now people that, you know, that's how they did work previously. Now all of a sudden they can expose their stuff to the entire world. My friend Alexander, that's part of the team, I remember for a while there, he was highlighting a bunch of artists that were in Venezuela. And, you know, there's roadblocks there, right? And what they've been able to accomplish, you know, in the NFT world that they would not have is just out of this world, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you, Stacey. And actually, the technology is extremely versatile now, and innovation is happening rapidly. Like almost every few months, we are seeing something new. And NFTs, it's not only art. NFTs is recently I've seen the whiskey on NFTs, the brand. I've seen the NFTs on a real estate. And it's exciting for investors in the space, and at the same moment, it's exciting for the actually people who are creating these NFTs.
Think of even this. Think of when, and things are moving fast these days. Like technology is way faster than what it used to be. Think about, say, when Ticketmaster starts doing all of their stuff. All their ticketing in an NFT. How easy is that? How secure is that? Okay, and then remember, you know, back in the day when people used to hold on to ticket stubs, you have that NFT forever. So it's a game changer in so many ways, in my opinion.
Elena? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, this is Lila, and I just wanted to add to your comment on real estate. So I'm also seeing like the title search industry is really going to benefit from NFTs because it establishes ownership, right, of real estate.
I agree with you.
So I think that, and a lot of it, that's still evolving, but I think that is going to be huge for the whole industry. So this is just disrupting so many industries, from books to movies to art to real estate, you know, to pretty much everything. So anyway, I just wanted to add on to your comment about real estate.
Yes. Thank you, Leila.
I think the real estate use case when it first came out, that was I think real estate and like titles is just a really good use case of blockchain, period. Like even more so than the original purpose of payments, because it's a use case where, okay, you really need to have secure transactions, and you need to be able to prove like a chain of ownership within the assets, right? Because the values are very high. But to complement that also, I think the fact that the transaction, like with real estate, the transaction volumes are, like people are not out here spending, like making 5 real estate transactions a day, right? It's a once in a while type of thing that like requires a lot of security, a lot of verification of proof of ownership, and as a result, I think it was a really good, like when I was first learning about blockchain technology, it was one of the use cases that jumped out at me, not only for real estate but also things like ownership of maybe like physical art as well, transferring ownership from one person to another and keeping that record in a decentralized and secure way, I think is a big improvement from what we have today.
Yes, Norman, totally agree with you. And the most exciting thing for me personally is that Intercoin can anyone with the technology of Cubics to create their own NFTs in the future and to run with it with private technologies. Maybe Greg can tell us more about the Cubics plans and maybe a little bit more about Token Society. You can tell what you've done for the Token Society, Greg?
Well, Token Society was one of the early clients that we have from when I went to Florida, the Bitcoin conference, and basically we built for them something that they wanted, since we build custom stuff. You know what I mean? So basically, Cubics technology is able to build the website, and Intercoin technology is able to build the smart contracts. So when you go to NFTs right here, Intercoin, let's see, non-fungible token contract. We came up with so many innovations for them, including the ability to have people, authors, the original authors, make a commission even after the second and third sale, even if it's not on a specific exchange like OpenSea or whatever. You know what I mean? It's basically we've built all this, we wrote all this code, and then we also deployed this site. A lot of the design of the site was directly dictated to us by the client and how they wanted. So all this stuff, it's in the press. If you're on the back end, you're able to change how, for example, how shall I put it? You can pretty much change any of the text. You can, without having to necessarily contact the us, which is the website developer. So the sites that we build is like a content management system. You know what I mean? So that's basically what it is, and we help it to work. And of course, you can also kind of manage it. So so you go to one of these things and you see the Eddie Bogart NFTs that are coming soon, and you can literally go ahead and play them over here and so on. So the site is also serving as hosting for these NFTs, because you could see the small picture, of course, but when you actually come to it, you could see this. And if you share on Facebook or you share one of these things, which right now I'm sharing so you can't see, but if you go on Facebook, it will share all of the stuff there. And it's basically all the other technology that we have currently, which is to say, here it is on Facebook, tracking who invited whom. You can maybe later pay commissions when people click on this and go back to your site, right? That's the idea, and all of it works out of the box. Of course, everything we do is now available for others. So if we do something for, celebrities who want their own NFTs, guess what? We now are able to repurpose a lot of this general purpose stuff for others. So that's the kind of stuff that we have been doing. And yeah, that's pretty much what Token Society is about.
Yes, thank you, Greg. And actually, most exciting for me personally was that the artist would be remunerated even on resales of their art. That wouldn't be a case if artists sold the actual painting, and the painting in a 10 years became more valuable. The artists wouldn't get anything from it. But with the NFTs, artists would be remunerated again and again as long as NFTs are on sale. That's what's the beauty of it. for me personally, what I can see in your creation, in your actual technology, what you created for token society, and the beauty that it can be used by someone else as well, again and again, the technology what you create. That's what excites me in Intercoin. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else want to talk? I'm going to step away for 5 minutes. I'll come back. But I just wanted to kind of say that when I come back, I'd love to talk about the second part of NFTs, which is the community part, and how communities can have their own coins and have their own NFTs, and what that all means. Because like I've been saying, we live in a world where we don't see it, we don't question it, but there's reasons why, and they're very obvious reasons why certain things are the way they are. Why GitHub is running, has become the place where Git projects are stored, even though they're a centralized site, and GitHub and Git itself is decentralized. There's reasons why, I was reading the other day, Bitcoin became centralized in the centralized mining pools. Basically, there's stories about how Bitcoin's becoming more centralized and so forth. There's reasons for all this. But what I wanted to talk about, to come back, is the reasons of the NFTs. Elena, you mentioned that they're being centralized too. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How are NFTs exactly being centralized? But what I just wanted to mention when I come back is this. All of the stuff that we see, Google, the web browser that is produced by Google that we're using, like literally everywhere we turn, everything we see, a lot of it had to do with a pool of capital that was deployed somewhere in order to promote something. And, the first person to have 1 million Twitter followers, Stacy, was Ashton Kutcher. And it's not an accident. He wasn't just a random guy who was a grassroots, became the biggest, the first one to hit 1 million followers. It's because Ashton Kutcher was placed in movies, right? And that 70s show. And who did that? Well, the people that owned the TV stations and the movie networks. So you got to understand that most of this stuff from the old world comes from kingmakers and industry decision makers that decide to put all their capital behind somebody, and then that capital is then converted into other forms of capital, like followers on Twitter. And then those followers, once you have as we all know, the influencers want money, and back then it was called endorsements, and whether it's a cereal company or whether it's a crypto company. So that's how you can make money monetizing your followers, and you can buy more followers. And we don't know how many followers of those are real. And my point is this, that there's a big, often, there's always an incentive for people to use capital to sort of get ahead in the system. And that's exactly what the old systems were all based on. They were based on having the infrastructure for distribution, for production, and for sales. And today, all of that's being decentralized. So maybe that represents a revolution in some way. Somebody can create an NFT. But to what extent do you think they can really get through when there's going to be a glut of all these NFTs? What do you think they can do? And do you think they're still going to have the need to access capital and personal connections from, Harvard or whatever, to push their NFT project or their coin project? Like, at what point is it really going to be, is it going to stay decentralized, or do you think it's going to be, just another sort of taking over of what was previous, like the internet? The web initially was very, very decentralized. People had their own forums, the bulletin boards, they had a great time. And they had things like these Hacker News, right? This forum. And then what happened was Facebook and a corporate took over, and now we all live mostly in, not on sites, but we live mostly on Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. So do you think that's going to happen again, or do you think that this time there are forces to decentralize the marketing and like all this stuff? What do you all think of that?
I think it'll depend a lot on the companies that are behind it. If they believe in staying decentralized and making that happen. There's there's a lot of money to be made in making things centralized, so you just need the right actors.
I was hoping that the team would talk about this, not just one person, but I guess I wanted to kind of have a discussion about that.
Let me jump in for a second. So let me ask you this: where do you think capital comes from? Because how can the people who have access to resources, they didn't always have access to resources, right? So where do you think that originated from?
I'm not sure. Do you know?
Yeah, I do. So one way, okay, is through tech. Okay, so if you look at, so one of the alternative viewpoints I'd like to bring up, right, this notion that people who have resources are always going to keep having resources and have every advantage. It's just, I think it's an incomplete picture, because going by that logic, you would see, all right, if you look on the Forbes list, the top list of wealthiest people, they wouldn't, like, who would they be, like, following the logic? Well, they would be the people who first came to Plymouth, like in 1700, right? There would be no Bill Gates, because how could Bill Gates have reached it when their parents were just like middle class, like regular people, right? Like everyone in the top Forbes list would be like descendants of Washington, or like Jefferson, or whoever was considered the elite back in the day, right? But the truth is, if you look on the list of people who had access to the most resources in this country, a lot of them, sure, they had privileged upbringings, but a lot of them are also people who've created technology and created something to disrupt the social order of our day. So I think that's one way. That's one way in which these things change.
Yeah, it makes sense, because like the more money you have, the easier it is to make money. So it makes sense that there has to be something to disrupt that. And basically, yeah, technology would be the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think technology is a really big one. And also, like, people come up with ways to disrupt players who get complacent in the system, right? They come up with ways to, when Kodak first came out with when the digital camera came out, like Kodak basically became, like, they were not as relevant as they once were, right? Because just because you're the most dominant company in one, like, economic period, that doesn't mean you're always going to be the number one. In fact, I think it's very rare. I think it doesn't, like, ever happen. It's very rare that, like, the number one can actually continue and like the number one player in a given industry or a given field can sustain and constantly sustain that advantage over, like, really long periods of time. There's a saying in Chinese, like, the translation goes something like wealth doesn't last for more than 3 generations. First generation makes it, the second generation spends it, and the third generation wastes the rest of it. So I think things are always constantly changing, and it's up to us to grab these opportunities as they arise.
Even like an example of that could be.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
on, Stacey.
Sorry, just an example of that could even be like, for example, the United States. The United States has a lot of power in that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, what they're doing with innovation, shutting it down, who knows? Like, I feel like a lot of our tech people in that are leaving the US and going to other countries because the US, with regulations and all that kind of stuff, they are not very easy to work with. So, that's something that, I don't know a time period, but that's something that allows other countries to get ahead of the US because, we're not into technology here. We're not, I don't know, we almost push it away.
Yeah. I think you have a very fair point, like especially in crypto regulation. Some of the stuff we've seen in the recent years has been like absolutely backwards. By the way, if this interview gets like too edgy at a certain point, we can just cut the parts out. Okay, but yeah, I agree with you. What were you saying, by the way, Evelina?
Yeah, I wanted to say that actually in the last 30 years, your example with the Forbes, richest people are actually in United States, and the focus has shifted away from the old inherited money to the new people and the first generation, I would say, billionaires. It never happened like in the last 30 years. A lot of people have the actual very big amount of monies, not only billionaires, but became millionaires in the first generation. And yes, a lot of it from the technology in the last even not 30 years, but even 10 years. 20 years since internet was popularized.
Yeah, absolutely. I think technology is like a big. Yeah, it's a big factor. It's a big factor in that. And frankly, just like as a like personal, like. If what Greg was talking about was really true, then I think we should just all pack our bags and go home because why are we even working on this project? Right?
Well, we're working on this project because we're disrupting the industry. What I'm here to say is that the web disrupted those publishing houses.
Correct, but going by your logic, you yourself would have no chance going against companies that are backed by Sequoia or Kleiner Perkins, right? Because they have the capital and you have no chance. So by your own logic, why are you doing this?
I didn't say that we have no chance. There's definitely, if someone perseveres enough, but I had to work for 10 years, man. It's not like, you were probably still in high school when I first started this or something. Like literally, I was. I'm here to tell you that we did apply to VCs, and the VCs, they're capitalists and they want to see a return. They want to see a profit. So, in the kind of world that we see now, people don't have a universal basic income. They live paycheck to paycheck. Half of America does anyway. So they don't necessarily have the luxury to go ahead and recruit each other to work on a project that's grassroots and they put them on GitHub or Linux or Wikipedia. They do here and there. But most of these people who do this are independently, they're financially secure, or they have a side job and they do it. All these open source projects that take down the Goliath, Linux takes down Windows, it's on the server and everything like that. Android is now based on that. Another operating system is called FreeBSD. There's all these BSD, OpenBSD. They're Berkeley systems. There has to be some capital. Even the Linux Foundation is sponsored by corporate sponsors. So the idea that a really, truly grassroots effort can take down. I mean, look at Andrew Yang. Maybe he'll be able to take down the two ruling political parties. And that's even harder because we have the ballots are set up in such a way that you have to vote for only one person. And so you need to change the ballot to even, try mathematically to get that. But if you just look at the market, of course, capital dominates. Of course, look, if Paris Hilton wanted to put out a CD, which she did, Paris Hilton put out a CD. Do you think it was because she was a talented musician? No, it was because, she had the money and she was able to do it. I'm not saying that no one, absolutely no one, is able to break through. But like this was years ago, the Paris Hilton album. So the thing is that, of course, there's going to be exceptions to the rule. And sometimes exceptions are the tortoise versus the hare. We're just lucky that no one decided to build an open source platform just like what we're doing with Cubics, that is able to power token society and is able to power, the Yang site and all this stuff. And it took us years to get all the bugs out, and it loads fast and it works and all that stuff. But it's still not at the point as Facebook is, and it will take a couple of years to do that. And the thing is that even though we've done this, okay, there's something like WordPress is sponsoring matrix.org. So Automatic, the company behind WordPress, pumps $5 million into a company that grows Matrix, the open source. Oh, come on, advertising. Seriously? Okay. Communication system. So all of this today on the web is based on advertising. It's based on keeping the lights on and reporting to Wall Street earnings. But that's not to say there's absolutely no way to get there. Wikipedia has got there. Linux has got there. Pretty much all the open source software, like the web servers that power the internet, all the web browsers are based on open source code. Open source wins, but it either requires a society that has a universal basic income that is able to negotiate 4-hour work weeks and spend a little time working on their own projects, like Google has the 20% time. I don't know, I think they still have it. 20% is essentially, Google had a pioneering thing that said, even our employees, they can only give 80% of their time. The other 20% is on their own, whatever they want to do. Of course, the company owns everything they do, but at least they get to decide what they work on. And so that's really and then there's one more, there's Valve software, that basically the employees decide what they want to work on completely. It's complete chaos. And it's a very interesting sort of completely libertarian sort of thing in there. I forgot what it's exactly called. Economics, I don't know, anarchy, whatever. Basically, no bosses, no nothing. You choose what team you want to work on, and it works. And they attract you. So, like, there are these experiments, but by and large, the entire society is run by a company like Inc.com that pays people top down and decides whether to publish what they do or not, tells them what to say, how to say it, and put some advertising on it. And that is essentially what most of our content is today. Now, can there be a revolution? Of course there can be one. And I think NFTs and permissionless platforms are what's going to enable that. But yeah, like, you could see the reality all around you. I mean, it's playing right now. Like, here's an ad, there's ever more ads, and anywhere you go, you have to get a protector, a landlord, an Inc.com that will publish your thing, and they're subject to the market just like anybody else. So currently we're living in a society where you still have feudal landlords and serfs, and the content providers are the serfs. And I should say that at Cointelegraph, I wrote an article saying how the web lost its way. One second, I apologize. Cointelegraph, here you go. This is my article from Cubics. This was like 2019. It was published in Cointelegraph a month before Tim Berners-Lee published his thing. Tim Berners-Lee, the web, capitalism. Basically, he published his, even this year. He's always publishing it, and they're always talking about this, all right? But But you need to do something. You need to actually be able to do something about it. And that's what I want to talk about next. But Norman, what do you think? I mean, you could see it all around you. Everywhere you go, you see people trying to get onto centralized platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Telegram.
Yeah, but my problem is, it's just like, okay, so like, even if I like accept everything you say is true, like it's not like it's not like something that's like insightful or like provides like a kind of like edge. Like, how is that going to change like what your action is going to be? Like, going into like the fact that you say like, okay, Christie's, like for example, like an NFT artist is like backed by a corporation. Okay, like congratulations, like insightful observation. But it's not like the kind of insight that can give you anything that's like action relevant. Whereas I think my insight, like making memes that like resonate with people, that's something that you can actually like take and actually run with it and do something that like you yourself can actually take action and do. And I think that's like what's different about like these two frameworks.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. When you lived in a feudal society, before the French Revolution, you had the caste system, and you had the clergy, and you had the lords, and you had the king, and you had everything, okay? And in India...
Yeah, like, congratulations. Like, you make that observation. Great observation.
Well,
what are you going to do?
Well, that's what you do. You start with the most obvious observations. You don't want to start with an observation that people don't find to be true. The fact that it's so obvious and it's everywhere around you is the starting point. So, like, I've said this since before Trump started running for president in 2016. I said, if you tell people stuff that is true and everyone knows it's true, and they open their eyes and they see it's all around them, but no one says it. The emperor's clothes are not there, but everyone is saying that the emperor is not naked. They're not talking about it. And you're the person that stands up and says, look around you, right? Then what happens... No,
man, I think people are smarter than you think. Like, people understand like what you're talking
about. No, but that's the first step.
They don't need this explained it to you again. They don't need it explained.
So, no, they do, because what happens is that when Trump ran for president, people said he tells it like it is. What they were talking about is all the stuff that he said that a lot of people were thinking. I'm not saying whether it was completely 100% true, but he said it in a simple way, and everyone's like, thank you, finally somebody says that. All right? Somebody finally says that. I actually wrote, I'm not going to do this right now, but I made a video back in 2016 where literally I made Donald Trump decoded when he was running, like why people trust him and what is going on. I'll play that some other time for you guys. But it goes down to, if you go into a classroom in Baruch College and your professor starts off the class by telling you stuff that you've known all along is true, but no one tells you these things, you're going to trust that professor, and what they say next is going to have a lot more weight than if they just told you the normal things. Okay? So yes, congratulations. I've noticed something that's true, and nobody seems to be really emphasizing it. Well, that's the point. Have you ever seen the speech V for Vendetta? Have you ever seen that movie?
No, I haven't seen it.
All right. So the thing is, like, he ends the speech. I just want to see again advertising. All right. It's just going to be more of it, and I can't skip it. I can't stop it.
Pre-order now.
Oh, I'll be sure to pre-order now. All right, here we go. So he takes over the TV studio. This is like an anarchist movie. He takes over the whole thing, okay? And he's able to get in there. And then takes over all the TVs.
Dad, what's wrong with the telly?
And this is fascist Britain, It's like it's a whole thing. It's this awesome comic by I forget his name. It's the guy. I think it's the same guy who made the 300. Now they have to let him proceed. Okay, so this is what So when he has an audience of everybody, what do you think he starts off with? Or what do you think he says to make everybody actually do something?
Good evening, London. Allow me first to apologize for this emergency channel. I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility, repetition. Bloody hell. I enjoy them as much as any bloke. But in the spirit of commemoration,
Who's that, Mum?
whereby those important events of the past, usually associated with someone's death.
All right, now he talks and has a lot of V references. But the point is this, at the end, what does he say?
Isn't that? You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to... Fear got the best of you. And in your panic, you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutton.
All right, it's a little different, but here's my point. Here, and he ends, he says this.
He promised you order, he promised you peace. And all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
Inspector, we're almost through.
Last night, I sought to end that silence. Last night, I destroyed the Old Bailey to remind this country of what it has forgotten. More than 400 years ago, a great citizen wished to embed the 5th of November forever in our memory. His hope was to remind the world that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. So if you've seen nothing...
This is the point. If you've seen nothing...
If the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me 1 year from tonight, outside the gates of Parliament, and together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten.
Well, quite a movie. And that guy's a true anarchist. But the point is that the system, if you don't see it's all around you and the ads are playing and you're always controlled, and what do you do every day and where do you share and what do you do and who actually owns this company and who owns this company and are they currently being talked about in Congress, and is our representatives trying to figure out how we can
Of course we see it, dude. Like the dominance of like Facebook is like a topic that's on like everyone's mind. Like people are calling for bigger like tech revolutions. I think people are not like I think you seem to have this like idea that like people are just like sheeple and they're just like ignorant and they don't know like anything.
Well,
I think that's too
people don't have the means.
I would respect your fellow citizens like a little bit more.
I think I have a lot of respect, probably more respect than many people have for the general population. I believe that the general population has many people that are brilliant, talented, and need a chance.
The general population is just like too dumb to like realize like their exploitation.
Well, there's many people in the general population who would be much more educated if the public school system was conducted online and not through, obviously, a top-down government approach, because then there would be competition, there would be online multimedia presentations, and I speak about that too, but I'm not going to talk about it here. But yes, it goes down to, it's not the people, obviously, it's the system that, you know, puts the parents to work for corporations, and they work 40 hours a week. That used to be the case. They work much more, and then the kids have to actually go ahead and be stuck in the school, and it's mostly a daycare center. There's so much more that can be done for the kids, and that's what the teaching app is all about. So here, okay, so you're asking what is the solution? First, I'm going to tell you that I believe in people.
Yeah, the solution, what the question you should be concerned about is, first of all, how revolutions happen. Second, okay, how do people with capital acquire that capital? Because they didn't like always have it. It came from somewhere. You can't just reduce it to say, hey, these people, they've always had it, therefore they always will have it.
No, the people are irrelevant. It's the capital that speaks. The people, if tomorrow I was chosen by Columbia Records to put out a CD, I'd become a millionaire over a course of a year. And then
why is Columbia Records in that position in the first place?
Because
that's like the question
it's
I think
a corporation.
You should be concerned about. And not like, oh, if Columbia Pictures chose me tomorrow, like,
no,
I'd be rich. I think that's a very it's a very useless thing to think about. What you should think about is, how did Columbia Pictures become Columbia Pictures in the first place? Right?
But the answer is always the same. The answer is that Columbia Pictures is one of many corporations, and it happened to be the survivorship bias is the one that survived, is the one that got to the top. Just like there were many social networks before Facebook, and there were many people who did exactly the same things as Mark Zuckerberg.
I think that's a part you can like think a little bit more about. I think it's more complicated than just survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is basically you saying, okay, you don't know how like they did it, so you're just gonna assume like it's a random process.
Saying you know how they did. No, saying you know how they did is saying you found a strong correlation between what someone does and all the top corporations were able, like everyone who does this, there's a good chance they're going to become the next Columbia Records. And what I'm saying is no, there is no thing like that unless you count perseverance like we have for years and years and years. And being able to buy these domains, for example, on a centralized system of domain name registry. But, you know, getting good names early on in the App Store. So like had we not done that, we would have been in an even worse position. So yes, there are some things you can do to improve your situation, like a good domain name. But hold on, Norman.
I think that's
hold on,
because you didn't like.
But hold on, Norman. But the thing is, even though you may be early, and again, being early to something that is a permissionless system, like registering a domain name. Guess what? I had to buy this domain name. I was able to negotiate it for about $4,000. This particular teaching app, because we want to build a teaching app to help the kids. But this whole revolution is possible. I'm going to talk about what we're actually doing to solve it, because I think that's the important part. But it's the opposite. It's not that we don't. It's not that I don't respect the public. Quite the opposite. This kid right here, or any kid, has a lot more potential that they're ever going to get in a public school. And if the public schools were competing against each other, at least, that would be better. It would be even better is if we could use the internet to take advantage of the fact that now people can work from home, study from home. We need to rethink the whole thing. So this pandemic actually opened people's eyes and say, hey, you could actually not commute to work and waste 2 hours. Maybe your kids can actually, you spend more time with them, and so on. Kids need love. Kids need time from their parents, not just, teachers. I'm not saying they need, I'm not here to say I know what kids need totally. But what I'm trying to say is, I believe in, you should mute yourself if you're typing though, that I believe in, we still hear you typing, by the way, just letting you know. Norman, you're typing, I can see it. I believe in people's potential, but in order for that potential to be realized, the adults have to be able to spend more time with their families, and with each other, and that means a UBI or some sort of redistribution of the power dynamic between the adult and their employer. And you could say the same thing in the feudal society, that, hey, good for you, you've identified the problem. Well, I can talk about the solution. But Norman or Elena or Stacy, before I talk about any solution, do you agree that there may be a problem in society that goes deeper than just Facebook? Or it's the system of incentives. It's a system that promotes certain things over other things and shapes how we behave. Technology could be used for good, but it can also help shape how we are bombarded with notifications and how we have to go to work and commute 30 miles, which grandparents didn't have to do. So just wanted to say, like, what do you think in general? Is there something to fix, or should we just like fix one thing, which is maybe, you know, NFTs can fix access of artists, and that's good. But maybe the problem is deeper. Maybe the problem is we have to actually have an alternative, like open source software, or Wikipedia, or Creative Commons.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think my eyes were really opened when everything happened with COVID. I think everybody's eyes were open because I think everybody's life has changed, right? Whether you switched your career, whether you either just had a short period of time, 2 or 3 months off, and did not have to put up with the hustle and bustle of, commuting to work, whether you, after COVID, you continue working from home. I think right there, I think everybody's eyes open that the way everything has been being run is wrong in general. And I mean, technology can fix lots of that.
Yeah, technology can fix so much. The thing is, like, I'm not saying capitalism is a bad system, not at all, far from it. Capitalism is the best system that we have had to date, producing all these things, except for open source software and UBI, which I consider to be a better system simply because people choose to work on projects not because they are living paycheck to paycheck and have to pay the bills, but they choose to work on a project because that project is something that attracts them and they want to see this thing built. Whether that is a technology that helps people through technology, or whether that is an NFT project or any entertainment. Like if Paris Hilton was able to get a band to perform with her just because she's so talented and good and everyone wants to hear the music, that's great. Or if she's so beautiful and that it's very unique, then that's great. But the fact that she says, okay, those things are not true, I'm just gonna use my daddy's money, let's say, and do it anyway. That's fine. I'm not saying we should take that away from people at all. I'm just saying we should have an alternative system where people have disposable time and financial security that they know they're not going to be ruined if they don't have enough money for health insurance. They know they're not going to be ruined if they don't have enough money for daycare or something like that. And they actually spend time with their own kids. And so they use that time to learn coding or practice their hobbies, or spend time with their kids, or join an open source project. So the open source project that I want to this is why Intercoin communities is important, because these projects voluntarily, without doing a violent revolution or even disruption, just start to give out their own tokens, their own currency, and tell people, okay, well, you have to work to pay the bills, but at least you can go and earn some of my project's token on GitHub. I have my own token, and who knows, if you really believe in this, then get the tokens now, and later your utility tokens might be worth something more. Similar with Wikipedia, and therefore you can almost have a smart economy where vandalism is costly, and you can be sure that the same person is going to be wasting resources constantly. It's like going all in poker and losing most of your stack. And you can't do that very often, so you can't act the fool all the time. So that's the kind of stuff I think Intercoin is able to facilitate. It's not just about helping communities of people who already have giant communities. Of course we need to approach large pools of capital. Of course we need to approach large communities that already have mayors or celebrities. But what I'm saying is that we're building the technology for anyone to we're building that world of a UBI together with disposable time, and people decide, because I really believe in people. That's the thing. Norman, do you believe in people? A lot of people who say, if people had free money and free time, we are worried that they're not going to work. And those are the people who don't believe in people's choices to maybe work is taking care of your kids.
I also believe in the market as well. I think one of the things, that one of the benefits of market structure is it makes sure that the thing that you're making is something that's actually going to be useful to other people. And the measure of that is whether people are going to pay money for it or not.
No, that's not always the measure. Linux is useful to other people. Creative Commons digital content, very useful to other people.
It's not always a measure. It's not a perfect measure, but it's a measure that it works, you know.
Well,
it's not a perfect
okay,
measure.
Wikipedia is immensely useful. It's translated in all these languages, and it's super useful. And you go to any page in English and you get on this, right? Today's featured article. Okay. Immensely useful. No one has to pay to use it, right? So there's not always a correlation between usefulness and how much money the Wikimedia Foundation takes in, right?
Yeah, there's not. I agree. It's not a perfect. It's not a perfect measure.
What if it was not just not a perfect measure, but in fact it distorted the market in a way? So you're saying the market, you believe in the market. Here's the thing: what if capital can be used to distort what is actually the best outcome, right, for people? Like maybe the best outcome is that everybody gets to use the Wikipedia information. What if more things were run like Wikipedia? For example, I like to give concrete examples. What if we do drug research as open source? All right, so open source drugs. And I wrote about this years ago. I wrote this 8 years ago. What happens if instead of patents, instead of the pharma companies putting up all the money, but then also taking all the going after everybody? What if the drugs were open source, just like Linux? And so anybody can produce the drugs once they're discovered and approved. But the discovery would be funded through NIH or public funds, or maybe with your own coin, drug coin or whatever, as opposed to having a pharma company, right? You could go down the line. So it's not necessarily true that the market allocates everything the best way, because there are things that the market doesn't value. Things like taking care of your kids. You don't make any money by staying home and taking care of your kids. Where's the money coming from? Right?
Well, it is valuable. The market does value it because you pay for babysitters.
I guess that's true. You pay for services. But I guess what I'm saying is, if it's a closed system and the parents are taking care of the kids, the market discourages
that. Just because the parents, they could be babysitting for other kids. The thing they're doing still has value. They're just consuming that value for themselves.
Yeah, the thing is that in a good economy, the parents should be doing something other than taking care of their kids. They should be practicing their profession.
Because so they can do something that, you know, they can go to the market and they can do something and extract a certain value, or they can take care of their kids, which they value at more than.
That's only if they can survive. So what I'm saying is the market creates a pressure on the parents to neglect their kids and to instead try to earn enough money to pay the rent, for example. Because that would be a worse outcome if they got thrown out on the street because they were taking care of their kids and didn't actually serve a corporation or someone else, right? So that's the point.
That's just no, because no one would choose to neglect their kid over. Yeah, no one would choose to neglect their kid. People value their kids more than other, things.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. People neglect their kids. The vast majority of people go to work and they put their kids on a bus to go to school because you know what they value more than their kids spending time with their kids? They value having a roof over their head so that the kids and they are not evicted, right? That's even more important.
Yeah. So that's just a reflection of their values.
Well, that's everyone's values. If you get thrown out on the street and you're a homeless family, that's not exactly the best thing for the kids. So it's the lesser of two evils to make sure that you could go to work and your kids have to be taken care of by a babysitter. But the point is that I agree with you that people can hire others. I totally agree with that. We can outsource everything in our society, and then the market would be very efficient. We can work 10 hours a day doing what we're good at and let other people take care of our kids. We can have other people clean our homes. We can have other people do our laundry. We can have other people, and they do, deliver everything And then we can have robots doing those things. So it's not like I have a problem necessarily with that. I'm saying there are things that the market does not value with money, like information that can be easily copied. So going back to NFTs, it's information that can be easily copied. But for the first time, we have a market valuing it at millions of dollars. That to me is very new and highly surprising that...
No, man. Things that the market doesn't value. The market values everything. For some reason, the market's not valuing something. That's because typically of externalities and some kind of pricing failure. So, for example, greenhouse gases is like a big one. Like people care about like breathing in fresh air, right? But it's the way the costs are like allocated in the system. Companies internalize the profits and externalize the costs, and that's why you think the market, for example, doesn't reflect like you look at pollution.
That's one reason, and that's a big reason.
People don't value having like a clean air. No, people do value having a clean air. You just have a coordination problem of like externalities. And I would say the same thing is with Wikipedia. I think a lot of people would pay probably cash money to keep Wikipedia alive. But it's a free rider problem with Wikipedia. It's not the fact that Wikipedia is like just inherently like not valued.
Well, you mentioned two things. You mentioned the free rider problem, and you mentioned externalities. I agree with you that externalities is another class of problems. It's a huge problem that is not necessarily solved with any other economic systems like socialism or anything else. So you're not going to solve externalities by switching to a command economy or switching to some other type. It's not so easy. But yes, externalities are a big thing. So factory farming hurts the billions of animals in abysmal conditions every day. Like, okay, we're having this show. I'm actually going to show you. Meat.org, and I say this, I'm eating meat, so I have to deal with it. This guy, Paul McCartney.
Cut the segment after like 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I'll cut it. Just hold up a sec. So we're talking about Meat.org. Paul McCartney shows how the chickens are barely able to move in their cages.
I'm Paul McCartney.
All right, this is real animals. They're not dead. Right.
Pigs are bred to grow unnaturally fast, which causes injury. An unnatural diet.
Basically,
they're dragged along the ocean floor.
This is for fish.
When they hold onto
farms.
The ships, they're absolutely abusive to animals. Fish are forced to swim in their own waste and congeal from lack of use. Their feet become lacerated and their bodies bruised and cut.
This is just one example of negative externalities. This is not your grandpa's farm. Chickens were not treated this way, but we have billions of people on the planet now, and the industry has to serve very efficiently these billions who demand a $1 hamburger. So you're right, externalities, this is probably the starkest example of pushing suffering onto animals in order to internalize the profit, right? But that's what happens in the system with externalities. That's for another time. But we're talking about something else. As important as this is, I want to talk about the marginal zero cost of copying information. The reason Wikipedia is not valued, this information could be copied, okay? Because we're talking about NFTs. This information can be freely copied. You can't use a market to value something that can be copied at zero marginal cost. And that's not me saying it. Here's World After Capital by a venture capitalist here in New York, Albert Wenger. He works for Union Square Ventures, who invested in Twitter, invested in Etsy Marketplace, and by the way, invested in CryptoKitties, which was the original NFTs, and I chewed them out for
zero marginal cost of copying information is just another version of the free rider problem. because one person
Yes.
creates the information and then everyone else free rides on the information. It's the same thing. You're not like creating a new category of problems here.
Well, Union Square Ventures invested in CryptoKitties, all right, and that's where they kind of lost my respect a little bit. They invest.
CryptoKitties has product market fit. Everyone loves CryptoKitties.
They may have product market fit, but back then it was 2018, and when they did this, they kind of lost my respect because back then it was considered a game like Pet Rocks, you know. And why did they do it?
Pet Rocks, dude. Do you know how much Pet Rocks sold for on Ethereum?
Yeah, but that's my point. I'm wondering whether there's something to this, or whether it's just a fad. Pet Rocks were a fad too.
Fads are explainable. Don't just say it's like, oh, it's a
Okay,
fad,
but
therefore it's like...
Right, but the thing is, we're trying to change the world and not get distracted by fads. So the question is, should Intercoin get into the NFT space? And I think the Intercoin should get into the NFT space.
No, because you can learn something from fads, because fads are human phenomena, and I think that's something we should learn about.
Well, I'm not sure that is. I'm not sure which whether it is a fad. I'm trying to see the actual value in it. So back then they were talking about. I remember I was talking to these guys.
Cute.
Norman, what I'm saying is I'm in touch with the same people that helped kickstart the NFT phenomenon. Right? They're right here in New York City, and these same people wrote about capital and how digital technology delivers universality of computation at zero marginal cost. It can potentially solve any solvable problem. Extra copies can be produced for free. In other words, when Tesla figures out a better AI software to run their cars, they can download it to all the cars at once. And the only cost was the R&D cost, which is what you're talking about, Norman. The free rider problem, right? We just have to pay to develop the Wikipedia articles, and the upkeep is very small. We only have to develop the drugs once, and the upkeep is very small. And then everybody gets to copy the Wikipedia article and manufacture the drug without owing royalties to the original Wikimedia Foundation or anything like that.
Yes, I'm not against the idea of open sourcing drugs. I think it could be a great idea.
Okay. But that's a completely different basis on which you run your economy. You're basically saying that now there is going to be a way to finance the R&D, which is in the billions of dollars. And I have friends who are doing coins for that, and that's interesting too.
Answer me this then: how is crowdfunding different from just the original concept of a corporation is a form of crowdfunding itself? It's not categorically different. It's just pooling capital.
Well, yeah. Remember, that's
the Dutch East India Company wanted to finance a profitable voyage to India. They couldn't do it themselves. That's why they invented the corporation. People pool their capital together. Your idea of funding drugs is not categorically different from going out to investors. It's just instead of going to 100 investors to finance your company, maybe you go to 10,000 investors. They're not it's not a category.
No, but there is a fundamental difference between...
What's the difference?
I'll explain. The gold that they brought back from the West Indies, as they called it, it was limited in supply. So that gold that they discovered, because it was limited in supply, it could be sold. Okay? Once Wikipedia produces an article, or once a drug is discovered, the information is published in papers and so on, anybody can copy it without buying it. So the difference is that whatever they discovered in the West Indies in their expeditions could be sold because it was actually a physical object. It was scarce. The thing is, the marginal cost is zero. And that's where the uniqueness comes in. Before computers, and you could copy the Vysotsky songs, but besides that, copying became cheap only recently. And Thomas Jefferson actually was arguing about this too. Thomas Jefferson talks about copyright, and he said that information should not be owned. In a famous letter of 1813, Thomas Jefferson compared the spread of ideas to the way people light each other's candles. He who receives an idea from me receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at mine receives light without darkening me. Back then, the word taper, you were reading by a candle. That's where the word "not worth the candle," by the way, comes from. Is you're not worth the candle, meaning getting up and lighting a new candle to read something. So back then, Thomas Jefferson was talking about the merits of copyright, and today we see copyright extended to 100 years with Mickey Mouse laws and stuff like that. So going back to the point, should we have the government involved in even like enforcing patents, enforcing copyrights, or can we have NFTs, as an alternative system and open source? Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying no.
Oh no, yeah.
They have control of enough stuff.
No, your point earlier, Greg, was you were trying to argue for like open source drugs. That like don't shift the argument here. You're trying to argue for open source drugs. My point is, I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's like that different from like just having corporations financing it. Right?
The difference is that corporations finance things that can be monetized later. Never mind the externalities, like I said, with the animals or with the plastic in the oceans or with any of the other, the kids that are neglected by the parents or any other thing.
Okay, wait.
Never mind that.
Pause you for a second.
Never mind that.
Argument is, so your argument is in a crowd fund, people will fund something even, like, in a crowd fund, people will fund something with no return on investment, but in a corporation financing, they will only finance something with the return.
So this is where I'm getting at. I'm saying that NFTs have brought back the scarcity aspect that was not present with abolishing copyright, or I should say not claiming copyright and not claiming patents. So if you were to give out open source software like Linux, it took over the world. You launched an open site like Wikipedia. It took over from Britannica and Encarta. Like, who even talks about those anymore, right? All we do is open source stuff. You look at all the servers run on the internet. The servers are run by open source software. You look at all your software that runs right now. This is based on open source software. This browser, this operating system is based on BSD, and so forth and so on. So the engine of innovation, it seems to me, at least in computers, and to a large extent in science, that's how science has always been done also, is giving away the results. And so if you funded the drugs in this way, then it would be like any other science department. So like Albert Einstein decides to publish his theory of relativity. Does he make any money from it? Jonas Salk decides to publish and give away the vaccine. And you ask him, why did he do it? And he said, Jonas Salk, he said, why did you give away without a patent? The real reasons he didn't patent, I don't know. There's often, the legend of why he didn't do it. But he did say publicly, he didn't patent the vaccine, he says. Well, he said, there's no patent. How could you patent the sun? That was his, famously back then, he said that. The thing is, like, maybe he's bad at economics, claim these people, and no, he should have extracted the rents and everything. But my point is, most of the innovation on the internet, most of the innovation in the world has been done with gift economies, like science, open source, Creative Commons, Wikipedia. And so we have these benefits, but we don't credit the system that produced them necessarily, and we don't realize that. Instead, we live in a world where the systems are not this, right? They're advertising based, and they're top-down employing people. You see, that's the difference between a bottom-up grassroots approach and that. So,
well, have you thought about maybe corporate financing is just an additional plus on top of the open source that otherwise would have been developed regardless? So maybe Facebook is not in conflict with Wikipedia. Maybe the argument would be, in a world with no corporate financing, there will only be Wikipedia. But in a world with both crowdfunding and corporations, you can have both Wikipedia and Facebook.
I want both.
I think
innovation
happens regardless, but value capture is something that doesn't necessarily happen, right? because you're right. I think a lot of people innovate for the sake of innovating. They don't seek to charge rents on it.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that
additional boost on top of it.
So let's get to NFTs here, because I think to bring the discussion back, NFTs represent a certain scarcity that goes back to the ideas of copyright that was lost with open source software. And I want to talk about two economic models to actually monetize content, online content. So like I said earlier, I think it's good for society to not monetize online content and not speculate on its value. As you can see, tons of people make changes to the Wikipedia article, and most importantly, there's no heroes, there's no celebrities. They talk about it and they fix the problems on the talk page, which hardly anybody reads, but they have these discussions as to what should be there and what should not be there, right? And basically, the end result is a balanced article which addresses most of the criticisms, as opposed to something that we call free speech, which I personally, the word free would imply that, people are free to say whatever they want, and that's true. But Twitter has the network to distribute what they say unequally, right? How many followers they have depends on how much capital they've put into doing all this. So if somebody decides to tweet something at 3 a.m., that is totally categorically different than someone who has to go through a peer review process on Wikipedia or Science, right? You could publish your article on archive.org and you could have a preprint, but until it's published in Nature magazine or Scientific American or something like that with peer review, scientists don't take it as seriously, because we understand that we need more people who are your peers or whatever to review content. And yeah, that comes out a little more slowly, but it's healthier for society. One other thing I want to say about that is, like with news, the news is controlled, right, by CNN or Fox or whatever. And they're also for profit. And I'm sure you'll see some ads here somewhere as you scroll through. But more importantly, they decide what their editors will accept, what their writers will write. And if you don't write what they like, well, then they will, there's the ad, the unavoidable ad. Okay, so they control, that's the feudal society. And what I'm saying is, information wants to be free. It's easily copied, and once it's out there, it can help people in ways that the original owner, quote unquote, the author, didn't intend. Okay? Just like 50 Shades of Grey started as actually a fanfic of Twilight. I was like, there's something familiar about 50 Shades of Grey, and it seemed to me exactly like Twilight, except that it's a billionaire instead of a vampire, and that's correct. It's actually a fanfic. So that fanfic could have never been written if people didn't have the freedom to remix. So I want to talk about NFTs. I want to talk about remixing, because I feel like I would love Intercoin to jump in here, and everything we've been talking about, the value systems that we have, the libertarian value system where the government isn't coming in and enforcing copyright, enforcing patents. I like the idea of scarcity with NFTs to some extent, but to some extent, I would love for the consumers, the people who buy the NFT, to participate in enhancing that NFT. All right. So currently today, somebody makes an NFT, somebody buys an NFT. The end. You're kind of done. That's all there is, right? And of course, there's plenty of people who never bought the NFT that decide nevertheless to put it up on their Twitter profile. So that's an example of the free rider problem, Norman, right? Somebody bakes it, and somebody buys it for $1 million, and then somebody else just copies it and puts it up there. So I don't know if there's even a lot of practical utility. I'm not going to say there isn't value in showing things off, but I don't think there's a lot of utility in NFTs where all you can do is look at them. What do you?
Dude, there's tons of utility, man. It's just utility that you don't understand. It's
educate
utility.
Me.
I told you before, it's about people's identities. Like having something pretty, is a value.
Okay, I bought, let's say, Jack Dorsey's first ever tweet. Let's say I'm the guy who bought it at $3 million.
Okay, Jack Dorsey's tweet has value because of historical value.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can see it on Twitter. I can literally
just, like, values that you're not like familiar with. So you try to like explain it away. You're like, oh man, it's just like it's a fad. You can't explain it. But actually, like, I think they can be explained. And you should a little bit harder. Think a little bit harder about it. People pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for crypto punks because they represent their identities. Identities are worth a lot. You can spend a ton of money on them. Okay.
Why can't I simply get it for free? Why can't I get a crypto punk by doing this? Copy image, right? Why can't I do that?
Because then it's, if you copied it, then it's not scarce anymore. It's like it's not yours, you know. On Etherscan, it doesn't belong to you. Everyone can see, like, everyone can see who the true owner of your picture is, and they can see it's not you. Check on Etherscan.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That's my question. I think we're cluing into something really cool. I want to ask you, like, I'm learning here, right? About this, I'm learning. Before that, I was sharing information. So my question is, look, tweets can be embedded by anyone in their site. Tweets can be viewed on twitter.com. What you're doing is you're creating a new space, something on Etherscan or something on, I could create something on BSC Scan. Heck, I can even launch an entirely different smart contract, which is like on the same network, and I can claim to own that tweet also. Like, it's not a stock. Jack Dorsey can't like stop me from selling another thing on the blockchain that also points to the tweet. So my question is, like, what we're doing is we have this interesting metaverse or world or something where it's only going to look at one blockchain and one smart contract that's the official one, right? And I kind of like that because it's like a libertarian version of copyright. It's like, yeah, this is my stuff, official stuff. So like, in that world, you can choose to look at it or not. But in the outside world, you don't have to look at it, right? I could just read the tweet, not knowing that somebody bought this tweet. Like, I don't give a crap who owns this tweet according to this network. So my question is, like, what are you really getting? Why can't you just get it for free by going to another network that sells it at like 99% off? You know?
Yeah, but then it would not be on the same network.
So what? There's plenty of networks. There's plenty of smart contracts.
So if I've made a copy of the Mona Lisa, why is it not worth as much as the original?
So my answer is the network effect. And I just want to explain to everybody listening here. The network effect. And
no, not everything is the network effect, man.
It's important. And also, that's where the value comes from. The bigger the network for your coin or for your language or for anything, that's why you want to have it. There could be a better language than English in every technical way, but it doesn't have as much value to you because no one speaks it, right? Like logban or whatever. So same here. I think the only reason you join an NFT is not the only, I shouldn't say the only, but the value really comes from the fact that people respect the Ethereum network and they respect your brand, that this is your smart contract, right? Like Token Society. My question is, what if there was no government enforcement, no courts, nothing? Somebody took Eddie Bogart's, NFTs that are coming out, right? They're coming soon. And you're like, haha, yeah, coming soon? I'll just do copy, right? And I'll just put it on my network and I'll say that I am selling them. Like, that's my question to you, is like, without enforcement, without them being able to go to court and say, I would have sold that, you owe me millions of dollars because you sold it for millions of dollars or whatever, right? Without that, what is there? Like, without force, what is the value of looking at a picture and not buying it versus buying it?
The value of the picture is the value you assign to it. You assign to it yourself. It's like your wedding ring. Like your wedding ring, like why does it have value? It's because it's, well, okay, so actually that's, the example is like a little off because wedding ring is common experience, but
Well, Milton Friedman said De Beers was the only company could never figure out how they have a monopoly. They have a monopoly.
Don't say. You're just like nitpicking.
No, because the wedding. I'm not nitpicking. I'm going straight to the point. The wedding ring could be sold for $5. It's just that you want to buy one.
But
that's
actually, that it doesn't. There's no contradiction here. There's no contradiction here. So exactly, the way we got there might not be like. The way we got here might be through De Beers, but the point still is like the value is ascribed because of specific messaging that's relevant to people. When De Beers advertised diamonds, they tapped into they had to campaign in a different way in different countries. Okay, the messages that resonated with American consumers didn't resonate with Chinese consumers, didn't resonate with Japanese consumers.
By the way, Norman, tell everybody where you heard that from. We went to Monaco, and that guy was explaining.
Yes.
It. Yep.
Yeah, that was the guy who explained it. Yeah. Yep. I forgot like who the guy was, but I heard it from that guy, and he made a lot of sense. And I think it ties back with what I was saying. It comes down to like what we as like human beings ultimately what we value.
Stacy, by the way, you don't know this. Elena, you kind of do. I'm like too freaking humble. I know that doesn't sound humble as I say it, but literally like Norman and I, the backstory of this De Beers, what he just said, for example, right, is that we went to Monaco to the family office conference that represents trillions of dollars in net worth. We met people there, right? Am I exaggerating anything? We went there, we met people, right? And they liked Intercoin. And I was invited to present Intercoin at a side event that happened right afterwards, the Swiss Growth Forum, right? And the Swiss Growth Forum invited us because Andrea, who Elena knows, who builds it, we told her that we would build a site, an app for her. And of course, it's interesting to us because she has some high net worth investors. So the backstory of all this is that Norman and I go and represent Intercoin around the world. We might be going to Dubai and other things. And we don't tell anybody about this. Like people listening to this or later are going to find out only because I right now decided to remember that, hey, we do a lot of stuff. And, and the people that I've cited here, like the guy who wrote World After Capital, they're literally the people that invested in CryptoKitties because they saw the NFT coming 4 years ago or 3 years ago, okay? 3.5 years ago. And I am in touch with them for the last 7 years, and I was not pleased with what they did because I guess it took them down a little bit in my eyes. But that's maybe because I don't understand. But the point that besides all this is that I know the people at Union Square Ventures. The people at Union Square Ventures are the people who are with Andrew Yang, who we also know, and we've built. Norman and I drew a mural by the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Tens of thousands of cars going. Right now, that same mural has the Intercoin mural by Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Like literally, we have done so much, and I think we're bad at sort of bragging about it or presenting it because why isn't this everywhere, right? Why don't people know about this? Because we have to start explaining, and in the same way,
cozy Verbo mountain.
Stupid ads.
With a kitchen where.
Anyway. I can't skip the ad. I'll just have to.
Everyone.
It's okay. It's like not.
They'll remember for.
Anyone can pay $5,000 and get into it. It's like not.
Well, yeah, I paid money. We got a better billboard, right? But at the end of the day, all I'm trying to say is that, as a side point, we're too freaking humble. We should explain. Intercoin is literally solving, in a responsible way, a lot of problems in the world. We're helping communities have their own coins. And now we're starting to have NFT mixes and NFTs. And finally, the last topic, because I want to get into NFT mixes for a few minutes. But we debate how scarcity and government enforcement of copyright on the one hand may be worse or better than an open source free gift economy where there is no scarcity. And we're asking where the value comes from. But we as Intercoin, we've built all these applications, intercoin.org/applications. We've built all of the tokenomics that I think will prove themselves over the next year. So all of us in this project, I'm very proud proud of our project, and I'm very happy you're coming on board and contributing, because all of us with our own voices, I want us to be active. I want us to be on the forum. I want us to be discussing this openly, publicly. And I think that working in the public's eye, our team getting this done, the development getting this done. I think this can revolutionize everything. But what I'm saying is, until now, we've been so humble that it's disproportionate. Like, the amount that we've done compared to Shiba Coin is totally out of proportion with how much Intercoin is worth versus Shiba Coin, which is on Binance, right? So we gotta start owning it. We gotta be like, hey, we freaking did all this, and now we have to sell it to communities, which we'll do. We do that in the primary market. We sell it to customers. But when it comes to secondary market, when it comes to CoinMarketCap, okay, next week we're coming out on these exchanges. I mean, look at Swarm. Swarm did have practically very little they've done over the last 2 years. And they're the ones that built our initial smart contract, which we're now getting off of. The official smart contract will be built by us. But this is the result. Swarm had a nice pre-sale. Look at that, right? They lost like how much? I don't know, 80% of their value? 90? Like 80%. Then they tried to get it back up, and then it didn't recover for like 3 years. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be that.
You know what? Because Swarm is, all they do is make smart contracts that anyone on Fiverr can make. So.
Yeah. They make smart contracts that anybody...
That's how their coin went down, because people realize like what they had isn't something that's a defensible business.
Yeah, I think Swarm was able to make a lot of money during the hype cycle of 2017, 2018. But during the crypto winter, I mean, let's face it, crypto winter takes everybody down. It's hard, But look, I mean,
but what's the difference between a coin that recovers and a coin that doesn't? It's the coin that has the product market fit that's making something that people want, right?
Exactly.
Look at Look at Chainlink. Chainlink can dump from $51 to $15, and then they can still come back from that.
Amazon came back after the .com crash. Yahoo came back. Google came back. I think Google may have gone public after the .com crash. I'm not sure. But what I know is...
It's about, again, it's just the same thing. It's about making something that people are going to want to use and...
exactly.
Yeah, make something people want. I think it's cliche at this point, but I don't think it's like wrong.
Well, this is Amazon stock. Okay, they keep innovating, they keep doing, and there's something behind it. It's not Shiba Coin, right? And if you look at the historical price of Amazon, you'll find what happened was, look at that crash. Huge crash, isn't it? From 70 all the way down to 10.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you were living in these times, right, you would be like, shit, these tech stocks are all garbage. You know what I mean? But why did it go from here to here? Because they executed. Because the primary business was serving customers. Okay? That's where the real money came from. And unlike buying the shares, once you pay Amazon, there's not that many refunds. I mean, yeah, they give refunds, but you're a satisfied customer. You keep the product. You pay for the service. That's how they get the money. But here's the thing with Intercoin is, unlike Amazon, Intercoin Tokenomics will pay you a dividend, right? Amazon's famous for never paying dividends, pretty much. I don't know. Has that ever changed? I don't think they've ever actually paid a dividend in their life, right? Mm-hmm. But the point is, dividends are at the discretion of the CEO or management. With Intercoin, we're building an immutable smart contract. This is where the communities are going to buy it, and 15% is earmarked towards the ITR holders. So basically, we're like an Amazon that's guaranteed to always give you dividends as long as you stake your ITR. And the longer you stake, the more ITR you get. And also, if you provide liquidity, you get even more bonus. So the best thing to do is to get your ITR, which we're going to launch in a week or two, and literally just provide liquidity for the liquidity pools. And so there you go. So if you want to speculate and you want to make money on the success of Intercoin, similarly to how people speculated on Amazon, you can do it by buying the ITR token. And if you are a community and you want to buy, you would buy the Intercoin, which is coming out soon. So that's basically, but I just want to show, this is what happens when people sell off your stuff. This is what it looks like.
Yeah, it is what it looks like, but it can also go back up.
Exactly.
The market is a voting machine in the short run, but it's a weighing machine in the long run.
This was the dot-com bubble. If you look at it now, it looks very quaint, right?
So you shouldn't be afraid of dumps.
Yeah, and we should be executing. The main takeaway I want to give from all this, regardless of what happens with the token, there's going public. It sounds like X Markets is going to be listing it on Tuesday. So they told us they're listing on Tuesday, so we started promoting and helping to drive people there if they're interested. We're not selling any. We're not doing any primary sales there. But if the investors decide to sell there or whatever, even if this happens, right, which I don't think, most investors told us they're not going to sell, or they're not going to sell like more than a little bit. But even if this happens, guess what? This is what we're going to be doing over the next few years. I'm not saying we're going to be doing it for 20 years, by the way. I'm not here to claim that I'm going to be... I'm probably going to put someone in charge right around next year, you know, like a year from now. But there needs to be a real business. So that's why I'm always approaching these things. NFTs to me are a little weird. And I'll just say this about NFTs. And Stacy, tell me what you think, or anybody tell me what you think. I think that NFTs, which you buy just to look at them or just to play them, are they're not sustainable. Like the prices may go up for some like Picassos and some like rare items, but the long tail of things is going to come down to earth, and people are going to realize there's a second type of NFTs, things like the ENS, the Ethereum name system, which is like domains. Any kind of NFT that allows you to change something, like you select one of your ENS names, which is Intercoin here, and then you go ahead and you change where it points to, right? And it could even expire. You could have a subscription that expires and you have to buy it again. So there's demurrage, and that's the same thing with coins. Demurrage means you gotta spend it. So basically, what I see is NFTs being used to access certain things and modify them, to attend a concert, to get badges. Showing off a badge is only important if it's shown on the site, on the official thing. As for these other NFTs, the ones that have, you can look at them, in my opinion, the only real utility, I'm not going to say value because people have subjective value, but the only utility of them or price is either because government enforcement, that someone's going to come after you if you go ahead and try to sell copies unauthorized. So that's violence, right? That's one possible way. And the other way, which is the Intercoin way, is a completely network effect type of thing where you have a community of artists and they simply respect that is your official address, that's your official website. And so if someone makes a knockoff, like Rolex knockoff, then they're just not going to pay for it. But they're still going to pay the next time you come out with something cool because you've made a name for yourself. So I think there is a way to make viewable NFTs valuable, but it has to do with the community aspect. And I think that's where Intercoin can really excel and Cubics can excel. And but these other NFTs have intrinsic value. I'm talking about NFTs that let you, access. Let's say that there was an NFT that there was a giant screen at Times Square, and you could buy access to show anything you wanted for 1 minute, that's been approved by censors, right? That would be an NFT. That would have intrinsic value because you can change something as opposed to just change nothing about it. So I've been talking a lot. What do you feel? What do you all feel about? Is there a difference between NFTs where you can't change anything about it, or you don't have access to anything, versus NFTs that you do?
I'm super bullish on like the use case items, like, you know, music rights, anything from real estate. As for like the NFTs that I'm into now, not that I'm not bullish, I'm just not 100% confident that it's not a bit of a bubble myself. But I think what you're paying for right now is the entertainment. You have community. It's bringing a lot of new people in the space. I don't know the longevity of, you know, I'm not overly invested in NFTs yet, but I definitely am bullish in like real estate, music, that kind of stuff. Even, you know, say Ticketmaster, like I had mentioned before. That's something that I know is interesting to me.
All right, so next time I'm going to talk about the NFT mix. We've come through a lot of names. We did NFT ensembles, NFT trees, trees, NF trails, NF trains. But I think in the end, something like NFT mix is, because it's just simple to understand. NFT mix. What is it? I'll just say briefly, and I've described it to everybody privately, but I think this may be the first time I describe it publicly in our own space. And that is this. What if the original person could start it off, but then the person that buys it can change it, can add to it, right? For example, you could have the never-ending story. You could have auction off the first line of the story, or the first paragraph, or the first chapter. So, you know, most people are not going to have time to write an entire chapter, but they can write a line. So you can have a poem. You start it off with the first line. You have 10,000 copies. And maybe maybe there's variations. Maybe there's 10 different lines. So people buy it and they decide, okay, I'm going to like sell the next line and the next line, right? So that you basically keep selling, the next person that buys can extend it. So they're having a hand in building this thing. They buy something, the big Picasso, but then they can draw a mustache on the Picasso. Right? So instead of just having a line in a poem, you could have a frame in an animation. You could have Donald Duck. And so here's where it's interesting. Donald Duck belongs to Disney, belongs to Warner Brothers. Oh, wait, no. Disney, I'm thinking of Daffy Duck. It belongs to Warner Brothers. But anyway, the likeness of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, or any other character can be auctioned off ahead of some sort of interesting event. But the scarcity here actually is useful, because you don't want to auction off the rights to Mickey Mouse in every possible way everywhere, but rather you want to auction off, say, 1,000 Mickey Mouses, and you give the first 10 to like famous people, and they're gonna like animate Mickey Mouse a few frames for the next guy and the next guy, and it's a collaborative like thing, and all of a sudden you got a Mickey Mouse animation that is not made by Disney. It's invited collaboration from like all these different artists and all these different styles, right? And it takes the plot into all these different other ways. So it could be a collaboratively owned thing. And here's the cool thing about it. There are so many different versions of it. It's like choose your own adventure. So you start here, and Disney started the first few frames or whatever. So it has to be about that. And maybe Disney comes back in here and says, okay, you can fill in between this and this. And then you go back to like, you know, the main story. And then you fill in between this and that and then the main story. So what you have is, A, you have collaboration. B, if the NFT sells real well, you go back to Disney and you say, or to the other people and say, I want to buy your NFT and like knock out your story and have my story, because my story is selling better than your story, so I'll buy out your story and like replace it with my story. So in the end, after all of this plays out, you have the winners of this contest, so to speak, right? We have proven that their story sells better than everyone else's, and they deleted everyone else's, but you can still see the history of like how it all happened. I think that would be a really cool take on NFTs, because you can combine the rights to a character. You can give the chance for animators to create their own stories and designs. And what I wanted to do is the same thing for fashion. For example, if there's a new movie coming out and Angelina Jolie decides to give her likeness, there's 10,000 NFTs, and then designers dress her up in like 100 NFTs of this and 100 NFTs of that. And in the end, whichever NFT sells the best and beats out the other NFTs and overwrites, buys them out, that's the NFT of how Angelina Jolie's character is going to look in the next movie. That's the vision. Have you seen anything like that? I haven't seen anything in the NFT space that combines the rarity of the likeness, so you can sell your likeness in a limited way, and at the same time, the collaborative aspect and the competitive aspect of deleting everyone else's, say, branches or whatever, buying them out, and in the end, ending up with some winners legitimately from a legitimate contest. Like, what do you all think of that?
I'm too tired, man. It's been a 3-hour call. I'm gonna sign off.
Okay. Well, then don't say that. Have somebody else answer. Okay.
Don't worry, we'll cut it.
I think it's something that really could be put together. People do like to collaborate. I just have to think about. I don't know. You obviously know how to execute all this, but I don't know. Maybe we should actually hold Twitter Spaces and get insights. Get some NFT artists in there and see what they think. See, sometimes they can add to it, right?
Oh yeah. Okay. Anyway, that would be the subject of another thing in the future. But for now, I think we've talked so much. I think that this talk should be called NFTs and economics, because we've talked so much about scarcity versus being able to, freely use something. We've talked about copyright and the government enforcing things. And we've talked about the capitalism, how it may not value these things properly. But at the same time, we're living in a system where everything that we do, 99% of it is sponsored by corporations, produced by corporations, distributed by corporations, which happen to be on the top because they won. And if somebody else had won, then they would be doing the exact same thing. So we need to fight. If we want to make a world where we build this stuff that's free and open source, we need to fight for a world where people are slightly more financially secure, like a UBI. And that's what we're doing. But if we want to have some scarcity that could be monetized, that could be interesting too. So I think if Intercoin is coming into space of helping celebrities produce their own coin that's fungible, we may as well produce non-fungible, like we've been doing with Token Society. But I think that we're going to have our own take on it. What is this? Buying a tweet? I don't think Intercoin can really get behind this unless it was like a level 1. But we have to get to, this is nice, but I think what we can do is we can actually get to the NFT mix where this thing could be the next fad, if you will. And I think at least this fad is about multiple people collaborating and adding value, not just the original artist of the original NFT. So that's all I have to say about that.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
The thing that makes a lot of sense to me is I've never really experienced it as much in the crypto community as I have in the NFT community. They all seem to support each other. So that's why I think you really might be onto something here. Because all those communities are really good to each other, and why wouldn't they want to collab?
Oh, scheisse. This is actually great. So people could actually stop by each other's projects, collaborate, and add a few frames to each other's projects. So if you're saying that's the ethos, we could totally have a collaborative community where they can all make money and all kind of gamify it so that they buy out each other's NFT mixes and continue them. So Stacy, yeah, I didn't know that was the case. But if that's the case, that they're also collaborative, they would take this like a duck takes to water, which is to say, hey, I'm gonna stop by your Twitter space and your website, and I'm gonna add a few frames to your animation, and then you add a few frames to mine, and they can add each other's to each other's brand and popularity, right?
And that's actually very similar into gamers, NFT for gamers. They also collaborate, and I believe that they have something very similar already in the gaming space, where they provide opportunities for ordinary gamers to create extra stories of the game. Not with NFTs yet, but the idea behind is very similar. And I really like your idea. As I said to you previously, yes, we need to go with it.
Well, all right, I guess that's it for today. I'm going to try to make the AMAs more professional going forward, but hopefully after cutting out the most interesting parts and putting them into a small, trailer, it could be interesting. So anyway, I hope everybody didn't get too tired with this, but I think this is good. I love to have our conversations in the open. Norman, you disagreeing with me is actually good. I actually like it because, look, I think that if we have private conversations only about philosophy and about this stuff, then let's say we make our decisions in private and people are like, hey, why did you guys do that? But if we have this and we invite other people, then they can benefit and they can collaborate. So what I'd like to just ask everyone to do, and I'm tired too right now, is later this week, post on the forum and let's continue the conversation until next week. And hopefully we can all have our, don't feel free to Norman, feel free to disagree with me, not normally, professionally. And let's continue the conversation on these topics for next week.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for coming. People that did show up, thank you. I appreciate listening in.
I appreciate everybody listening in. If anybody has any questions, always feel free to jump in. We're not here to just hear ourselves talk, mostly.
All right, I'm going to sign off. See you guys later.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.